Sykes was found dead inside a home near Delaware and 18th Street around 9:30 last night. Santa Monica police tells NBC4 that he reported witnessing her son, 31-year-old Micah Sykes, stabbing him.
December 8, 2025, 9:19 p.m. A desperate 911 call breaks the silence in Santa Monica, California. A wife's voice, shaking with terror, reports an assault happening right in front of her eyes. The attacker, her own son. The victim, her husband of decades. Police race to the home on Delaware Avenue. Sirens cut through the quiet neighborhood. Officers rush inside, directed by the traumatized wife still standing in the house. What they find stops them cold. A 71-year-old man lies motionless, covered in stab wounds. Blood stains the floor of the family home. The paramedics arrive, but there's nothing they can do. He's already gone. This wasn't just any victim. This was a man whose voice had filled concert halls around the world. A Grammy-nominated opera singer who had performed at Carnegie Hall, the Metropolitan Opera, and stages across Europe. A man who brought audiences to tears with his gift. Now, that voice was silenced forever, and the person accused of taking his life? His own flesh and blood. But how does a family go from singing hymns together in church to a son allegedly stabbing his father to death? What darkness was hiding behind the walls of this seemingly perfect family? Welcome to Crazy Dark Files, where we dig deep into the cases that shock us to our core. If you're drawn to stories where family secrets turn deadly, where the people we trust most become the ones we should fear, then you're in the right place. Hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a case. Jubilant Sykes was born in 1954 in Los Angeles, California. As a young boy, he had a gift that couldn't be ignored. He sang soprano, and his voice was extraordinary. It was the kind of voice that made people stop and listen. Though growing up in L.A., Jubilant was surrounded by music. The sounds of black churches, gospel choirs, and jazz clubs filled his childhood. Music wasn't just entertainment in his household, it was life. But his parents had very different ideas about his future. His father believed in following your passion. He would tell Jubilant, "The goal is to sing, to communicate. It doesn't matter if you're singing Mozart or Stevie Wonder, the point is the same." His father understood that art could change lives. His mother, on the other hand, was practical. She worried about her son making a living. She suggested he think about becoming a lawyer or going into real estate, anything more stable than singing. Then came the moment that changed everything. Young Jubilant tried out for a boys' choir. The choir director heard him sing and immediately called his parents. Her message was clear. Forget about the piano lessons. Focus on reading music and singing. She knew she had discovered something special. That phone call set Jubilant on a path that would take him around the world. As he grew older, Jubilant didn't just become another opera singer. He became something unique. He refused to separate the music of his black heritage from classical music. He brought gospel, jazz, and spirituals into the world's most prestigious concert halls. He made them equal to the European classics that dominated those stages. His career exploded. He performed at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. He sang at Carnegie Hall, the Kennedy Center, and London's Barbican Center. He appeared at the Apollo Theater and the Hollywood Bowl. He performed at the New Orleans Jazz Festival. His voice took him to Deutsche Oper Berlin and hundreds of other venues worldwide. He worked with the biggest orchestras on the planet, the New York Philharmonic, the London Symphony Orchestra, the Los Angeles Philharmonic. He sang under legendary conductors like Kurt Masel, Lorin Maazel, and even John Williams. In 2009, Jubilant achieved one of his greatest accomplishments. He took on the role of the celebrant in a recording of Leonard Bernstein's Mass. He performed it with the Morgan State University Choir and the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. The recording was released by Naxos Records and earned him a Grammy nomination. A Grammy nomination, that's how good he was. But Jubilant didn't stop there. He recorded spirituals with the London Symphony. He released crossover albums for Sony BMG Masterworks, mixing classical and popular music. He collaborated with jazz trumpeter Terence Blanchard and classical guitarist Christopher Parkening. Critics called their performances unforgettable. He even ventured into acting. He portrayed the legendary tenor Roland Hayes in a stage play. He appeared in films and musicals, always looking for new ways to tell stories and connect with audiences. Music critics praised him constantly. They called his voice art at its highest expression. They described his performances as authentically passionate. What made Jubilant special wasn't just his technical skill. It was his ability to make you feel something deep in your soul. Jubilant Sykes wasn't just a singer. He was a bridge between worlds. He proved that a spiritual and a Schubert song could both touch your heart in the same way. But behind all the success, behind the standing ovations and the Grammy nomination, Jubilant was also a family man. And it's in his family life where the seeds of tragedy were quietly growing. Despite traveling the world and performing on the biggest stages, Jubilant Sykes never forgot where he came from. He lived in Santa Monica, California, in the Pico neighborhood. The house on Delaware Avenue near 18th Street wasn't just any house. It was his parents' home, the same house where he grew up, the same house filled with memories of his childhood. Jubilant married and raised 3 sons in that home. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A successful father, a stable marriage, and a family rooted in faith. The Sykes family attended Calvary Baptist Church, where Jubilant had sung since he was young. Even as his career took him to Berlin, London, and New York, he always came back to his home church. Pam Forbes Clayton, a church member, remembered him fondly. She said Jubilant was doing things throughout the world, but never forgot where he came from. Whenever she asked him to sing at the church, he would agree. She just had to give him advance notice, like his mother used to do. After getting married, Jubilant and his wife started their own ministry. His wife led Bible studies that touched many lives. Pam described it as a beautiful ministry. Faith wasn't just something the Sykes family talked about on Sundays. It was the center of their lives. The neighbors loved them. Sammy Murphy, a longtime friend who grew up in Santa Monica, called Jubilant a good-spirit, good-hearted person with a beautiful family. He couldn't say enough good things about him. Another neighbor who had rented a unit owned by Jubilant for 20 years described him as cool people. He said Jubilant wasn't the type to argue. As a landlord, Jubilant was fair and kind. As a neighbor, he was friendly and approachable. He was a man who had performed for royalty and presidents, yet he still took time to talk to his tenants and neighbors. He didn't act like a celebrity. He acted like a regular guy from Santa Monica who just happened to have an incredible voice. The contrast was striking. One week, Jubilant would be singing at Carnegie Hall in front of thousands. The next week, he'd be back home, attending church, checking on his rental properties, and living a quiet family life. To the world, he was a Grammy-nominated opera singer. To his community, he was just Jubilant, a good man who stayed humble despite his success. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Behind the closed doors of that family home on Delaware Avenue, something dark was growing. Something that would eventually shatter the image of the perfect family and shock everyone who knew them. Of Jubilant's 3 sons, only one still lived at home. His name was Micah Sykes, and he was 31 years old. Micah didn't live in the main house like a typical adult son might. He spent most of his time in the garage. He kept to himself, isolated from the rest of the family and the neighborhood. Sometimes, loud music would blast from the garage. Neighbors noticed, but they didn't think much of it at first. Young people listen to loud music, right? But there was something off about Micah. Neighbors started to notice strange behavior. One tenant who lived in a unit owned by Jubilant described Micah as a little weird. He said it seemed like something mentally was not there. It wasn't just odd behavior, it was concerning. According to police and neighbors, Micah had a history of mental illness. The exact details weren't public, but everyone around him could tell something was wrong. The tenant recalled disturbing incidents that stuck with him. One night he found Micah lying on the street, just sleeping there on the ground. Not on a bench, not in a car, on the street itself. Something was not right, the tenant said. There were whispers about possible drug use, though the tenant believed it was more than that. It was more like something mentally was not there, he explained. Then came the moment that, looking back, feels like a warning. No one fully understood. Jubilant himself warned his tenant about Micah. Think about that for a second. A father warning someone about his own son? That's not normal. That's a father who knows his child is dangerous. The tenant was confused at the time. I was like, why would he tell me that? He remembered. But Micah's behavior made it clear. Jubilant wasn't being dramatic. He was being honest. Sammy Murphy, the family friend and neighbor, had his own way of describing one of Jubilant's sons. He called him a bad man. He didn't elaborate, but those two words said everything. The Sykes family was dealing with something most families pray they never have to face. They had a son with serious mental health issues, and they were trying to manage it privately. Imagine being in Jubilant's position. You love your son. You've raised him, watched him grow, celebrated his birthdays, and prayed for his future. But now, that same son is showing signs that scare you, signs that make you warn your neighbors, signs that keep you up at night. What do? Do you kick him out and risk him ending up homeless or worse? Do you keep him close and hope you can help him? Do you call the police and risk him getting hurt or locked up? These are impossible choices. Choices no parent should have to make. The Sykes family chose to keep Micah at home. They probably thought they could manage it. They probably believed that love, faith, and family support would be enough. But mental illness doesn't care about love. It doesn't care about faith. And sometimes, it doesn't matter how hard you try. Micah continued living in that garage, isolated and troubled. The family continued going to church, singing, and trying to maintain a normal life. Neighbors continued seeing the warning signs, but didn't know what to do. The tension in that house must have been unbearable. Every day, Jubilant and his wife were walking on eggshells, never knowing when something might snap. And then, on December 8, 2025, something did snap. The Sykes family had been living on a knife's edge for who knows how long. That night, they finally fell off. Mental illness and family dynamics are complicated. There are no easy answers when someone you love becomes someone you fear. If you're still with us, show some love by hitting that subscribe button. This story is about to take a dark turn, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Here's a question for you. What would you do if someone you loved showed warning signs like this? It's a question no one wants to face, but the Sykes family was about to confront it in the worst way possible. Monday, December 8, 2025. The Sykes home on Delaware Avenue in Santa Monica. At 9:19 p.m., that was when it happened. Jubilant's wife grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Her voice was shaking. She was witnessing an assault. Not just any assault, an assault involving her own son. Try to imagine what she was seeing in those moments. Her husband, her son, violence unfolding right in front of her eyes. Was she screaming? Was she trying to stop it? Was she frozen in shock, unable to move? The 911 operator stayed on the line as police were dispatched. Every second must have felt like an hour. At 9:20 p.m., just 1 minute after the call, Santa Monica Police Department officers arrived at the home in the 1700 block of Delaware Avenue. They pulled up to a quiet residential street in the Pico neighborhood. A street where families lived. A street where people felt safe. Jubilant's wife met them at the door. Imagine her state of mind, her hands probably shaking, her voice barely able to form words. She directed the officers inside the house. The officers rushed in, not knowing exactly what they would find, and then they saw him, Jubilant Sykes, 71 years old, lying on the floor. He had significant injuries, wounds consistent with a stabbing, multiple stab wounds. Lieutenant Eric at Luffy later described the scene. Officers arrived and contacted the reporting party, who directed them into the home, where they located an adult male with significant injuries. The Santa Monica Fire Department was called immediately. Paramedics rushed to the scene, hoping they could save him, but it was too late. Jubilant Sykes was pronounced dead at the scene, in his own home, the home his parents had owned, the home where he raised his children, the home where he should have been safe. A voice that had filled concert halls around the world was now silent forever. But the horror wasn't over yet. Officers searched the house, and there, still inside the residence, they found Micah Sykes. He was taken into custody without incident. Think about that phrase, without incident. No resistance, no chase, no struggle. Micah didn't try to run. He didn't fight the officers. He just went with them, quietly. It was an eerie calm after such brutal violence. A weapon was recovered from the scene. The evidence was clear. This wasn't a mystery. The police knew exactly what had happened and who was responsible. Lieutenant Louis Gilmore made a statement to the press. Based on the preliminary investigation, detectives believe this was an isolated incident contained within the household. An isolated incident. That's police language for a family tragedy. No random attacker, no home invasion, just a son and a father, and violence that ended in death. Evidence was collected throughout the house: blood, the weapon, anything that could help investigators understand exactly what happened. But no amount of evidence could explain the true horror of that night. A wife had watched her son kill her husband. She had witnessed the man she married, the father of her children, being stabbed to death. And the person holding the weapon was her own child. How do you survive something like that? How do you process that level of trauma? And it wasn't just her. Jubilant and his wife had 2 other sons. In one night they lost their father and, in a way, their brother too. Their family was destroyed in minutes. Micah was booked on suspicion of homicide. He would be taken to jail, and the case would be presented to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for charges. But no charges, no trial, no sentence could undo what happened in that house on December 8th. A Grammy-nominated singer, a beloved community member, a father, a husband, a friend, gone. Killed in his own home by his own son. The Sykes family home, once filled with music and faith, was now a crime scene. The garage where Micah had isolated himself was now part of a murder investigation. The rooms where children had grown up were now marked with evidence tags. December 8th, 2025 was supposed to be just another Monday. Instead, it became the day that a family was torn apart forever. The news spread quickly through Santa Monica's tight-knit community. Jubilant Sykes was dead, murdered, and his own son was in custody. People couldn't believe it. The tenant who had lived in Jubilant's rental unit for 20 years was devastated. When reporters asked him about it, all he could say was, "It's just devastating, unbelievable." He kept repeating that word, unbelievable, because how do you believe something like this? How do you accept that your kind, peaceful landlord was stabbed to death by his own child? Sammy Murphy, Jubilant's neighbor and friend, spoke to the media the next morning. He was still in shock. "I was born and raised in Santa Monica, so we were really pretty close out here," he said. What a singer. Good spirit, good-hearted person, beautiful family, a beautiful family. That's what everyone thought they were. And now, that family was destroyed. At Calvary Baptist Church, the congregation was heartbroken. Pam Forbes Clayton, a church member who had known Jubilant for years, said the phone hadn't stopped ringing. "He is so well known all around. People are calling me now just crying." Jubilant had performed all over the world, but he always came back to his home church. He never forgot his roots. And now the community that had watched him grow up was mourning his death. The classical music world was also in shock. Colleagues, conductors, and fellow singers shared tributes online. They remembered his incredible voice, his passion, and his unique ability to bridge different musical worlds. Institutions where he had performed posted statements honoring his legacy. While the world mourned, the investigation continued. Santa Monica Police Department detectives processed the crime scene. They analyzed the weapon that had been recovered. They documented every piece of evidence. They interviewed witnesses, including Jubilant's wife, who had seen everything. Micah Sykes was officially booked on suspicion of homicide. The case was presented to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, who would decide what charges to file. The legal questions were complicated. Would Micah's mental illness be used as a defense? Would his lawyers argue that he wasn't in control of his actions? Was this premeditated, or did it happen in a moment of rage? And the biggest question of all, what triggered the violence that night? These are the questions that haunt this case, questions that may never be fully answered. What was said in that final argument between father and son? What words were exchanged before the stabbing started? Had there been previous violent incidents in the home that no one knew about? Had Micah attacked his father before, or was this the first time? What interventions had the family tried? Had they sought professional help for Micah's mental illness? Had they considered hospitalization? Had they called the police before? And the most painful question, could this have been prevented? If Micah had received different treatment, would Jubilant still be alive? If the family had made different choices, would this tragedy have been avoided? We may never know the answers, but these questions will follow this case forever. What we do know is that a family tried to handle a mental health crisis privately. They tried to love their son through his illness. They tried to keep him safe and keep themselves safe at the same time, and in the end, it wasn't enough. Jubilant Sykes, a man who had brought joy to millions through his music, died in fear and pain. His wife will carry the trauma of what she witnessed for the rest of her life. His two other sons will forever be haunted by what their brother did. And Micah, he will spend years, maybe decades, in the criminal justice system. Whether he's found guilty or not guilty by reason of insanity, his life as he knew it is over. There are no winners in this story. Only loss, only grief, only the devastating reality that sometimes love isn't enough to save a family from itself. The Sykes case isn't unique. It's heartbreaking, but it's not rare. Family violence involving adult children and elderly parents happens more often than people realize. According to studies, untreated mental illness plays a major role in many domestic homicides. When someone's mind is sick and they don't get help, the people closest to them are often in the most danger. Families face an impossible burden. They love their child, but they also fear for their safety. They want to help, but they don't know how, and often they suffer in silence because of stigma. Jubilant Sykes left behind an incredible artistic legacy. His recordings of Bernstein's Mass, spirituals, and crossover albums will live on forever. His performances at the world's greatest venues touched thousands of lives. His influence on younger singers and musicians will continue for generations. His father once told him, "The goal is to sing, to communicate," and that's exactly what Jubilant did his entire life. Through his music, he communicated joy, pain, faith, and hope. He bridged the gap between gospel and classical music. He broke barriers in a world that wasn't always welcoming to Black artists. He proved that spirituals deserve the same respect as opera arias. But his death communicates something else. It shows us the hidden struggles that families face. It reminds us how fragile life is, even for those who seem to have it all together. There's a cruel irony in his story. Jubilant spent his life expressing emotion through song. He understood feelings deeply and could communicate them beautifully. Yet he was killed in an act of uncontrolled emotion by someone who couldn't express what they were feeling in a healthy way. One question lingers. In a house that was once filled with music, how did silence become so deadly? If this case moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Crazy Dark Files. We cover the true crime stories that make you think, that challenge you, and that stay with you long after the video ends. And if you know someone who's interested in true crime that goes beyond the headlines, share this video with them. Help us grow this community of people who want to understand the darker side of human nature.